Welcome to Conscious TV. I'm Renate McNay and my guest today is David Bingham. Hello, David.
Hi, Renate.
David is a spiritual guide and helped many people to realize their true nature, including me. You don't know that.
I do actually. I remember the afternoon in the garden here and we were sat at the table.
Yeah, I wanted to tell this story later.
Oh, good.
So, David was here before many years ago. I think you were one of the first people we interviewed on Conscious TV. I think it was 10 years ago. And we did about 3 or 4 interviews with you. And I just, in one of the interviews, David tells his story of self-realization. So I refer you back if you want to listen to that. And we jump right into the important things. And what prompted me to re-invite David was actually an email I received a few weeks ago, and I read a few lines of it. Dear Renate and Ian, I have experienced self-realization in 101 days, from 15th November 2020 to 24th January 2021. David has been my teacher. And it is primarily your interviews with David that have had the most significance in the process. I've literally seen them hundreds of times and I feel I know you all. It's been very hard and I lost almost everything in the process, of course. A new world opens up for me now, and all is well. So, David, we spoke a little bit about it, and what I wanted to ask you, maybe you can talk a little bit about what was so difficult. What did he do to go so fast through this process of self-realization? And maybe we can also establish now or later, what is waking up and what is self-realization? Because people sometimes confuse that.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe let's go first to your student. And so what happened? He said also, or you told me, that he never meditated, he never was on a spiritual path. No. For some reason he bumped into Conscious TV, bumped into you, and that was it.
Yes, well, he received a sample from Rhonda Byrne's book, The Greatest Secret, which just arrived on his phone. Right. And that was on the 15th of November. And so he was quite inquisitive, and because of the lockdown, he had time on his hands. So he thought, I'm going to really have a look at this. Yeah. So that led him to me, into Conscious TV. And then he was just really looking quite intensely at the Conscious TV interviews. And his process was very similar to Lester Levinson, which is where he just had this total focus that he didn't permit anything else. So he was in his room for that whole period of time.
So he shut himself away.
Yes.
For how many? 400 days?
Yes.
Okay.
And
what did he do?
Well, he was just sleeping and then waking and then watching the interviews and just getting clearer. And during that period, I spoke with him on 3 occasions. Mm-hmm. And so each time there was a process of refinement taking place. And then he just saw very clearly his true nature.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I have another email which actually you sent me, which it's very clear that self-realization is not an experience. And and this person, I don't know if I have the letter. So maybe it's something else I like to read. I just wanted to write to say thank you. Thanks to you, I finally realized my true nature. I have been seeking since 2006, and by reading up-tin books and doing various practices, I had some insights, but nothing that struck permanently. Then I came across your Conscious TV interviews and recommended by Rhonda Byrne. Is it Byrne? Yes.
Yes.
And I just clicked on one of them, and the first thing David was saying was, you are simply consciousness experiencing being a human. And that was it.
Yes.
It completely shifted
Yes.
his perspective.
Yes.
So now back to waking up. What's the difference between waking up and self-realization? Because for some people it's confusing.
Yes.
It was confusing for me many years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the main thing to know, which actually I heard you mention this in an interview that I listened to, which is that self-realization is loss of identification with individuality. It's loss of identification with the subject-object program. Because the truth is, for us all, we're simply this open space of beingness and consciousness, and everything is arising equally within that. It's just that from the age of maybe 2, we're conditioned into the idea of being a person. So even though all along there is the mind, the senses, and perceptions, up to the age of 2, all of those things arise equally. Whereas once the subject-object program kicks in, it gives the sense that you're here and then there's a world out there. Whereas prior to that, it's just a unified field of experience. So self-realization is simply the falling away of identification of individuality. And so it's really very simple. But I think people sometimes become confused, and something I'd like to mention, because it's arisen 3 times this week in conversations I've had, which is where people are actually afraid of self-realization, because on some level they feel as though they're going to lose themselves, because there's a misunderstanding, because there's a feeling that with realization individuality disappears, whereas the only thing that disappears is identification with individuality. So we continue to have the experience of human life, but it's just that we know on a bigger level that we're the infinite being, the infinite field of consciousness. So it actually results in an enrichment. So it's only the identification which is lost. It isn't the loss of individuality. Individuality actually becomes more enriched because there's a real appreciation, because we're seeing it in the context of our true infinite nature.
You know, sometimes what I experience is they are both running at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is the knowingness of who I am,
yes.
And yet there is the option of getting really pissed off or whatever. And, you know, it's almost like I have the choice
yes.
in this moment.
Yeah, and that actually is wonderful, because it's giving you the contrast of experience, because the context of individuality is really enriched by knowing our infinite nature, and that's really why the whole manifestation appears, because we wish to know ourselves by contrast, because just the simple knowing of our own beingness, although it is wonderful, the contrast of having the focal point of individuality along with that enriches both.
Yeah.
So it makes life amazing, because instead of being totally identified with the dramas of individuality, we can realize that is only a virtual reality game that we're playing.
Yes.
So we can then just function from effortless being, which is our true nature.
Yes.
But also, so it's having the ability to switch between the two, really, that gives the most fun. And that's really...
Do you still do it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, but waking up is more, you know, I had many different spiritual experiences and abilities, all kinds of, I could do magic. And I really thought, that's it, you know. And what I see now is that we get kind of lost in the experience,
Yes.
yeah, rather than sitting back
Yes.
into true nature and
Yes.
just watch these experiences.
Yes,
yeah,
definitely.
And that is the trap, I think. Also, some spiritual teacher I know,
Yes.
you know, they have some experiences and go out and think they are a teacher, can be a teacher now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, that is one thing, the self-realization. It's the biggest step. But then the real work starts, of course, the embodiment of it and the integration.
Yes.
And I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit.
Certainly. Well, the idea that you mention, which is that self-realization is experiential, is a hurdle that everyone has to overcome, because on the way to realization there tends to be experiences of a subtle nature where we can experience expansion beyond the boundaries of the body, silence, bliss, intuition, telepathy, all of those subtle experiences. And because they're on a more heightened level than the normal waking state, the mind assumes that they have something to do with realization. Whereas realization is totally effortless and it has no content. So we have to overcome the idea that it is something to do with experience. But the paradox is that with self-realization, once we begin to recognize our true infinite, effortless nature, then the possibility of more refined experience is far greater than it was before. So even though self-realization isn't something which is directly related to experience, it gives the opportunity for more refinement of experience. But as you were saying, the process which continues from realization is a process of refinement, because lots of the limitations we have, which are to do with mind programs, things to do with limiting beliefs and concepts about ourselves or about our potential or about the nature of the world, they need to be dissolved, really, and they tend to dissolve of their own accord. But it can be quite a dramatic process. So with Ken, for instance, the reason it was so dramatic for Ken is because it was over such a short period of time. But what I've realized, and it's different to the way I expressed this in the earlier interviews, is that the most important thing we have is determination, because determination is actually our divine will. It's the will of the infinite. And so for Ken, for instance, the determination was just absolutely 100% in a completely uncompromising way. So he accepted what was required for that process to take place. But it was quite dramatic, because most people process these things over years. Sometimes it's 20, 30 years. And for Ken, it was just 100 days. So it was quite a ride, really.
Yeah. Well, how does, you know, with realization, with self-realization, the nervous system plays a part in it.
Yes.
I feel. And the nervous system is often blocked with traumas and residues. So when self-realization happens, some channels seem to open up.
Yes.
And the body needs to be able to hold these different kind of energies.
Yeah.
And that, I think, maybe was the reason why in the tradition, like Buddhism and so forth, people meditated and meditated just to strengthen their nervous system or prepare themselves for grace to happen.
Yes, yeah, I agree. It's more gentle in that way. But the whole idea of self-realization is a story in one respect, because we remain as the infinite being, and that's all we've ever been. We never actually incarnate as the human being. The human being is almost like a projection. So while we can fully experience on the human level, we never actually become the human being. So it's the way consciousness is unfolding is it's giving the opportunity to understand things in a more and more simple way. So, say 50 years ago, the methods that were being used for self-realization were much more complicated. Whereas because it is like a virtual reality game, as things progress, the opportunity to become self-realized becomes easier and easier. And to quote the British scientist Rupert Sheldrake, consciousness is a morphic field, which means that we are all the totality of that morphic field. But the game that seems to be played at the moment is the more awakening there is to one's true nature, the easier it becomes for everyone, because it's a field which is accessible to everyone, even people who have no knowledge of self-realization. That morphic field becomes more accessible, and the ease of self-realization is something that is it's just unfolding. So it seems as though there'll be a point where everyone will instantaneously realize that they're the infinite being.
So, yeah, that's the 100 monkeys theory.
It is, yeah, it is.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful the way you expressed it. I never heard anybody saying it like you, that we never incarnate as a human being. Did you say this?
Yes,
yeah.
it is only a projection.
So I always thought, if I am completely self-realized, then I am the complete human being.
Yes.
So what's what?
Well, that's definitely...
Isn't that what Jesus also showed us, the complete human being?
That's conceptual on one level, but it's also attainable. Mm-hmm. And so the truth is that you are the pristine, infinite, effortless, timeless being.
Yeah.
And that's all everything is. Every human being, every animal, everything in this apparent manifestation remains as the infinite being, and we can't ever move from that.
Yes.
But the reason we have this experience is for the intensity, because on an infinite level, we can experience impersonal love, because our infinite nature is impersonal being. It isn't personal. The personal belongs to the relative. So it gives us the opportunity to have that contrast, because if you're the ocean, you remain as the ocean even when it appears as a wave. So the opportunity to experience as a human is something which it's a kind of limitation, but the infinite self is never disturbed or affected, because there's...
Sure.
Sometimes it's called cosmic law, but it means that there's no possibility of anything within the relative polluting or affecting the absolute, because the absolute is pristine, and we remain as that. So, for instance, the infinite love of the absolute, which we can experience in an impersonal way, where it's just the totality of love for everything, we can also filter that into personal experience, and that's where we have the intensity, because it focuses love into the personal experience rather than just the impersonal. Mm-hmm. And so that gives a level of intensity, because there's a poignancy to that kind of experience. So in human love, the poignancy is that it's limited, that can only last a certain period of time, that it's going to be lost at some point, and so it feels really precious. But the reason we do that is because it gives an intensity to that experience. Because if you know you're the infinite being, infinite love, infinite potential, infinite bliss, then really you can't have that same level of intensity, because you know it's always okay.
Yeah, everything is always okay. Yeah. So what you say, David, is we are coming close, maybe close to a certain momentum where people
Yes.
are waking more and more up.
Yes.
And yeah, I remember our teacher said once, you can feed millions of people, but to help one person to realize their true nature is much, much, much more than feeding all these people. Yeah. So what you are saying, that it goes right into this morphogenetic field and
Yes.
affects everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the game we've all played as humans is we've played the game of limitation. So if you take the biblical context of the Garden of Eden and the fall, really eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is actually having a go with the human mind, because the human mind is a dualistic instrument. So when we play with duality, which is the thing we can do when we have access to a human mind, is we can get into the whole realm of judgment, of right and wrong and good and bad and all the polarities. And so that's the game we've all played. But the way we return to the Garden of Eden is through self-realization. And self-realization is simply recognizing that our true nature is effortless being. And then a kind of surrender arises. It's not that we surrender, because the individual can't surrender, but to quote you in one of your previous interviews, surrender happens.
Yes, surrender happens.
Surrender happens.
Right. Yes.
And surrender has happened to a lot of people actually over the past year or so, because the nature of experience that most humans have had on the planet is to do with limitation. We've been limited in terms of the things we can do. Yeah. And so being able to surrender is something that many people have learned. Because lots of people thought, well, I couldn't stop going to the pub, or I couldn't stop seeing my girlfriend, or I couldn't stop going to the nightclub, or I couldn't stop shopping, or whatever it is. But actually, because it's been imposed, then everyone has had to surrender. So it isn't that they surrendered, because they wouldn't have done it by choice, but surrender has happened.
Yeah, but do you think they surrendered, a lot of these people surrendered because they were too afraid?
That's probably an element in this situation, certainly, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was not their choice.
No. But it's just a way to see the way surrender works, because the human mind would say, well, I know what I need to be happy. And so the mind has a limited idea of what it needs. But the truth is, our infinite nature is infinitely intelligent. And that infinite intelligence knows how to make us really happy. Yeah. But the human mind doesn't really want to trust that, because it wants to be center stage. But once we realize that we do have access to infinite intelligence, and infinite intelligence arises from effortless being, then there's the opportunity to have the most amazing experience, way beyond anything you could ever conceive of with the mind.
Yeah, beautiful. So can we go back a little bit to integration? Well, somehow
Yes.
You said there is nothing to integrate.
Well, it's slightly different now, Renate, because for years it seemed as though we all had things like subconscious programs and concepts of limitation which needed to be integrated. And certainly there are things which can come to the fore from nowhere. There could be things like jealousy, or there could be insecurity or fear. Those sort of things can come following realization, which some people would find that shocking, because lots of people feel self-realization is the end of all of that. But in some ways, as you know, it's
the beginning.
The beginning. Shh. But the nice thing is that as consciousness is revealing itself more effectively, then the opportunity to integrate is something which happens in a really natural way, and because ultimately we always remain as the infinite being, we never move into individual experience. So the idea of having to integrate all of these limitations that was a kind of stage in a way, because there's no purpose really in integrating limitations to do with individuality when we've never actually been the individual. It's like getting somebody to do a lot of work for you and you don't need to.
So you also mentioned the benefits going beyond the need for spiritual practice.
Yes. Well, I think that's happening now, because the spiritual practices are something that we've done, and it's really because we're already home, because there is only ever effortless, timeless, infinite being, and that's the only place we can ever be. We can never leave there. All we can do is pretend that we're not there, so we can play these games of seeking something or some sort of limited experience.
Yeah, we forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so spiritual practice is part of that game, because we are already home. And if you take meditation, for instance, meditation, we can use things like mindfulness or mantras or different techniques with the idea of the meditation taking us closer to who we are. But actually, the moment we just stop and notice that no effort is required, we're already home then. So the rest of it is just...
Yes, but there are some people who still get too much caught up in the experience.
Yes.
And wouldn't it be beneficial for them to have some sort of praxis and meditate?
Yes. Yes, certainly there... It comes down to one's own inner knowing, really, because some people require that sort of a structure and other people don't so much. Mm-hmm. But it's really to do with trusting one's own inner knowing as to whether that's beneficial or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can sort of override the conditioning by saying, well, actually, I don't need that. I can allow, for instance, as I'm sure you've experienced, as I have, if there are limiting beliefs or emotional experiences which arise, they can seem quite overpowering in the early days, but then in time, it's possible to disregard them. Mm-hmm. You just think, oh, it's that again. It's just coming again, and I don't really need to give it so much attention. Yeah. And then it's as though the invitation into that turbulence gets weaker and weaker to the point where it doesn't even arise, and then we notice it by its absence in a way. We just notice that it hasn't turned up for a long time.
Yeah. Well, when I listen to you, I have this feeling you are deeply, deeply grounded in your true nature. And I wondered if you can share with us, from 10 years ago to now, was there another process of deepening or what happened?
Yes. Well, there's certainly been a process, because initially there was some turbulence of different kinds. I guess I was fortunate in one way, because the way the way the idea of sharing this with people came to me came effortlessly. It came by just seeing that that's something that was available for me to do, and so people were approaching me. So I realized that effortless being, is the basis of the way we can function, rather than planning and rather than effort. And so I was really lucky that I recognized that the infinite being is infinitely intelligent, and it will bring the things to us that we need, that we don't need to chase anything.
Can I just ask something in between? So is this a feeling you have, you do not make a decision? You know, sometimes you struggle to make the right decision.
Yes. Well, it was, I've told this story many times, but it came to me quite early, which is that I posted out all of those CDs of the John Wheeler recording.
Yes, yes.
And I mentioned this in the earlier interviews.
Yes.
And there was no response from the people that I sent them to. I'd made a list of people I thought would be receptive.
Yeah, just to mention, John Wheeler is a spiritual teacher
Yes.
in America.
Yes.
And you listened to one of the tapes.
Yes, to a podcast.
Bang.
Yes.
You realized your true nature.
Yeah.
And David was so excited that he made hundreds of copies of this tape and sent it out to all his friends and family. So continue,
Yes.
what happened?
Well, there was no response at all. So that gave a really clear indication that wasn't a very effective way to do things.
Yeah.
So I just let go of that, and that was a form of surrender. But it isn't that I surrendered as an individual. It's just that surrendering happened because there was a noticing of the futility of trying to do that. And so what came from there is that people started to come to me, and I spoke with a few people locally, and I was able to assist them to realize their true nature. And that happened just with a few people, I think maybe 8 or 10 people, before the Conscious TV interviews. And so when I wrote to Ian because I really liked the interview he did with Roger Linden, who was one of my teachers. Mm-hmm. And so the whole process of the way things unfolded from there, and our relationship, my relationship with you and Ian and with Conscious TV, is something which came effortlessly. It isn't something that you or I had any part in, really. Mm-hmm. And I think the same is true of Conscious TV as is true of my experience, which is that Effortless Being has been at the helm. Yeah. And I remember having a conversation with you years ago where you were saying that you just have this, you and Ian are very intuitive, and you just have this feeling as to whether something is appropriate or not, and you go by that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's really how Effortless Being arises. And so it's something that you and Ian have been doing for years, probably much longer than I have.
You mean with Conscious TV?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you...
It's an intuitive process.
Yes.
For us, which is quite connected with our own path.
Yes.
Really. And, you know, we get so many letters a week, emails. Unfortunately, there are no letters anymore. No. Also, I wait every day for the postman.
You don't get any.
No letters. So, yeah, we get so many emails of people who would like to be on Conscious TV or recommendation, which we appreciate, and we look at all of them. But it's just the intuitive decision of whom we want to invite. Yeah. Because it's not a business, really.
No.
It's
to do with love, really.
Yes, yeah.
But that's really how things work, and I think that most successful people actually function on that level anyway, because the mind is a useful instrument for certain things, but for the bigger things in life, it isn't that useful. So I think even people with successful businesses function from that level. Successful artists or musicians, everything is actually coming from infinite, effortless being. It's only that our education has told us that it's coming from the mind.
Yeah, you know, I observed it with Ian and how he does his business.
Yes.
It's a complete intuitive process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's thriving, and
Brilliant.
and everybody involved has fun and enjoys themselves.
Yes.
That's what comes out of something which is the truth.
Exactly.
Which is the right thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you talk about utilization of the subtle bodies. What do you mean by that?
Yes, well, with self-realization, there's a kind of approach at the moment which is known broadly as Neo-Advaita.
Yeah.
And Neo-Advaita is really to do with recognizing when identification with individuality falls away. And it's just noticed that there is this infinite field of silence within which everything is appearing, and it's a unified field. But that really is base camp. It isn't the final destination. And so the enrichment of experience and the opportunity for expansion within the relative aspect of consciousness is something which arises when we become more familiar with subtle aspects of experience. Mm-hmm. And the Indian concept of the koshas, which is that we actually have 5 bodies rather than just the physical body. When we become conscious of that, we can utilize those sheaths of consciousness in a much more effective way. So, for instance, the 3 which most people function through are the physical body, the emotional body, and the mental body. So, for most people at the moment, they're only able to move between those 3, and they're all in the realm of effort. But the 4th one, Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is the body of wisdom, is where we learn to reside once there is realization. Because the idea of individuality exists on the mental level. It's a mind program, effectively. But once the identification with that mind program is no longer functioning, then we actually reside in the body of wisdom. Now, the body of wisdom is effortless. It's effortless being. And it's the body of wisdom that gives rise to intuition. So rather than having to engage the mind and be involved in effort, we can rest in the body of wisdom. Then everything we need can come to us with no effort. Mm-hmm. And that's how intuition works. And so, talking about Ian's business, the way you function, the way I function, we've become more familiar with that level of functioning where we can allow infinite intelligence to take care of things, and we know how beneficial that is, and it's the most amazing opportunity. It's just that they don't teach you at school.
No, unfortunately. But maybe if a big shift happens, maybe they start teaching it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really, it's the thing we all have, and that's why I mentioned that point. And also the 5th level, the 5th sheath, is called Anandamaya Kosha, which is the body of bliss. And what I've noticed with the people I've been speaking to recently, lots of people who've contacted me through Rhonda's book, I've spoken to far more ladies than I have men. And the reason for that, I think, is, well, partly because of Rhonda's energy, because Rhonda...
Can we just clarify who Rhonda is?
Sorry.
Well,
Rhonda.
Everybody, probably a lot of our viewers know Rhonda from the Rhonda Byrne from the book The Secret, or the film The Secret.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to let you know, Ian is going to interview her next week, and so watch out for that. And David was the very one who helped her to find her true nature. Mm. And out of that came her new book, The
The Greatest Secret.
The Greatest Secret, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think because of Rhonda's energy,
Yeah.
many of the people have been ladies. Amazing, actually, how many self-realised housewives there are in Australia. I had no idea before.
You're shocking.
Absolutely, yeah. Amazing people. But that frequency is something which has sort of come, and it seems to be more balancing, because lots of the teachings to do with self-realisation previously were dominated by men. And the thing is that in the body of wisdom, you find the men gravitate more towards the mind, whereas ladies gravitate more towards bliss. And so it's a much more expansive opportunity. And so that's really the difference, that in the body of wisdom, which is effortless being, we can become to consciously access either Anandamaya kosha, which is the body of bliss, or we can align the body of wisdom with the mental body, with the mind. What's ideal is to align it with both, so that we can maximize the functioning of the mind, so the mind can work where it actually becomes a servant of the infinite mind, the infinite being. But also we have access to infinite bliss as well.
Yeah. But there's also a process where everything slides into the heart.
Yes.
And I find that's where true self-realization
definitely
is happening.
Yes.
To live from that place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always feel men are much greater pointers to the truth than women. Women are better in teaching the embodiment or the integration.
Yes, that's a really interesting point, actually.
Because a lot of spiritual teachers we interviewed are men.
Yes.
And they talk completely different, you know. It's interesting. Why do you think that is so? Are they more, women are more connected with the earth, and maybe men are
I think
more with
maybe
the absolute.
Yeah, women are, they function from the heart more, as you say. They function from love and from bliss. So they're more grounded in that way and more yielding. Whereas with men, there's more. I think just the way the minds are wired, it's as though there's more opportunity to create structures, because with self-realization, to be able to point effectively, there needs to be an understanding of the structures and how they function, and which structures can be impediments and which ones can be beneficial. Whereas I think with women it's much more fluid, so it's more difficult to sort of pin things down. If it's all flowing.
Interesting. Yeah. So you also talk about ways to fine-tune knowledge of our true nature.
Yes.
Can you say more about that?
Well, the opportunity that is there now for everyone is something which it's really based on one's determination to discover one's true nature. And there's enough evidence around now to see that it is a genuine possibility, and that possibility is open to everyone. And that opportunity is dependent on the determination to achieve that. Because my perspective has changed since the earlier interviews, because I remember a question that Ian asked when we were having a conversation before, and he said lots of people that he's interviewed say there's really nothing you can do, that it either happens or it doesn't. And I think that may have been true of an earlier time, but what I see now is it's more to do with determination, because determination is based really on divine will. And we all, because we're all the infinite divine being, we all have access to that. And so having that clarity and determination is really the most important thing. If you really want it, then it's available.
Mm-hmm. So you don't think grace comes in?
Grace is definitely a part of it, but grace is available to everyone as well.
Yeah. Well, because my experience, that's how my experience, and maybe I can share that.
Yes.
So we have,
I'd
it
love
on
to hear.
tape. So after we interviewed David a few times, I don't know for what reason, I invited you for lunch. And you came all the way down from Shropshire for lunch, and it was a beautiful day, and we were sitting outside in the garden. And as I mentioned before, by that point, I had many spiritual experience. I thought I knew who I was,
Yes.
and I did also. I'm with Ian in a spiritual school at the Diamond Approach.
Yes.
From Almas for 20 years. We did a lot of psychological work and explored our unconscious and so forth. And I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, and you were sitting outside with Ian, and I remember I was kind of, I hope I don't miss something, and I have to cook here and whatever. So I take the salad or whatever it was, and I come outside and I sit down, I put the food on the table, and in this moment you say, there is the changing and the never changing. That's all you said. And I don't know what you were talking with Ian before, and I was sitting down and I felt literally a complete shift, a turn in my whole body. I didn't know what that was. I only figured out over the next days that my perception shifted. It's like what used to be the foreground was the background, and the background was all of a sudden the foreground. And I had this feeling like I was hit by grace. In this moment.
Yes.
And what I also feel now, there was definitely a transmission happening, because Ian had a very similar experience in the same moment.
Yes.
And there's a lot of gratitude in me for you, for that.
Well, that's very kind.
I think that's the most beautiful, amazing thing which can happen to us, to realize who we are. Yeah. And what I still don't quite get is, what was this visceral, this turning in my whole? It was like, it was almost on a cellular level, something turned.
Yes.
Well, did you hear that before, or do you know what this experience is?
The truth is that the infinite self reveals itself to itself.
Yes.
And where there is clarity in terms of what the infinite self is, then where there's an openness and a receptiveness, then that can be a shared experience. It was the morphogenetic field revealing itself. And so that's really how it happened, because if there is, I guess with lots of people you associated with before, the teachers you were with, you were probably having shared experiences on the basis of their own knowing and the experiences that they had. Whereas because there was that clarity, that was available, and also it was a kind of surrender, because there was an acceptance that maybe you trusted me. There was something that you felt that you could believe what was being said. So there was an openness, and there was an openness of heart. But that's really why we're having this human experience, because it's the most amazing thing, because while remaining as the infinite being, which is inescapable, we can't ever move from that, but we can also have this most amazing sharing, which is where we can experience love, connection, and the revelation on the personal level, which is just the most amazing thing. It's the most amazing thing that's available to us, really.
Yeah. The most important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. Ah. Wow. So, I have some written down ways to disengage the mind and integrate effortless being into daily experience.
Yes.
Is there something?
Yes.
You
Well,
want to
maybe we could do it now if you want, or we could do it a little bit later. But there's a technique which has kind of arisen, which is it's a way of pointing that has enabled lots of people to realise their true nature, and it's to do with effortless being. And so we could do a little demonstration now if we have time.
Of course we have time.
Okay.
Yes. Do we want to do it now, or we want to do it?
I'll leave it up to you, Renate, whatever.
Yeah. So are there any points what is really the biggest obstacle for people to let go?
Right,
and
yes.
Maybe that's an important thing also to point out.
Yes. Well, there are three main ones. The first one is the one you mentioned, which is where we believe self-realization to be experiential.
Yes.
That when we have heightened spiritual experiences, that we somehow have the opportunity to make those experiences permanent. So that's the kind of misunderstanding, because those experiences are always just experiences arising. So we can have gross experiences arising, or we can have subtle experiences, but they're still experiences arising within effortless being. So that's the first one. The second one, the main thing to know is that for there to be realization, there has to be an acceptance of equality, because if there's a feeling that someone is higher than we are, or a feeling that they're lower, then it won't happen. So the experience that you and I had in the garden there is because there was a feeling of equality, and that equality can sometimes be on the basis of love and respect, but it's a mutuality, and that's a really important aspect.
Well, it's interesting because, there used to be gurus, and you have to surrender to gurus, and he was the Almighty, and it's still going on in certain areas.
Yes, it is.
Certain spiritual teachers still like to be treated that way.
Yes.
And what you say, that is more difficult to realize your own.
Yes, that's a little game we can play. We can play the game of adoration, and it's something we can. That can be quite an enriching experience, but it's still on the level of duality.
Yeah.
But for realization, it's necessary to accept one's own sovereign spiritual nature, which is on the basis of equality. So, on the one side of it, you can have people where they feel as though they could never realize their true nature because they have a feeling of inferiority. They feel as though they could never that couldn't happen to me. Mm-hmm. So that's the one side of it. And the other side of it is the idea that someone, say one's guru or teacher, is superior, and it's the sort of most supreme and sublime knowledge that's available, and I'm so lucky to be associated with that. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really matter about self-realization. They've got all the answers. But we have to get to a point where we accept our own sovereignty and our own equality. And once we can let go of the idea that a guru or a teacher is superior to us, or that we're inferior to the possibility of realization, and then that's when it can happen. So we can, knowing that, it's much easier to attune to the possibility because it's on the basis of equality.
Yes, yes. Yes, sure. It makes sense as long as you give your power away.
Yes, yes. And we tend to do that in a joyful way, because with a guru or a teacher, we can, quite often there are gurus and teachers who have knowledge that is higher, and they could be on a higher frequency. There's a guy I really like at the moment. His name's Shunyamurti, and I only came across his channel a few weeks ago. And he has an ashram. It's called the Satyoga Ashram, and he's in Costa Rica, and he just has the most amazing energy and the most amazing knowledge. And so I really admire his teaching. He has a real depth of understanding, not only of the way the world is and the polarities that exist in this world, but also a real depth of knowledge. So listening to someone like Shunyamurti gives you a real depth and a sort of grounding. But it isn't that you put him above yourself. And the nice thing with his teaching is that he doesn't do that. It's actually on the basis of equality. And so it doesn't mean that we get to a point where we become spiritually arrogant and feel that we know everything that there is to know, because the truth is there are no upper limits. And so remaining open, infinite, effortless being can bring knowledge to us. And it's a bit like being a street fighter. You know, there's always someone who's better than you are or has higher knowledge. So it's really good just to remain open, because if we remain open, then there's always something more that can come to us. Whereas if we become closed and feel as though we have all the answers, then that's going to block it.
What I'm lately contemplating is, as everything is a morphogenetic field, everything is connected, and not only humans, but also animals and planet and so forth. So if we wake up to our true nature, does the planet wake up to its true nature? Do you have anything to say to this idea?
Yeah, I'd like to. What I feel is that the experience we're having on a sort of global level at the moment, probably the easiest way to understand it is in terms of the Indian concept of the yugas, which is that there was Satyuga, Tretyuga, Dvapara Yuga and Kali Yuga. And Satyuga is the golden age. And in Satyuga, there is infinite love, infinite bliss, infinite intelligence, infinite possibilities.
It's our paradise.
Yes. Yeah. The totality of existence known to be arising within oneself. And there's a very slow decline through the yugas until we get to Kali Yuga. And the way where we are at the moment is, on a global level, this is, it's as though all of the structures have become inverted, so that it's actually a parasitic system at the moment.
I said that this morning to Ian. Yeah.
It's a top-down parasitic system. So instead of there being total harmony, all the creatures and beings are eating each other.
Yes.
So.
And we are the biggest parasites.
The humans are.
The humans.
Well, I don't feel that humans are at the top of the food chain, but that's probably beyond the scope of this conversation.
But we're taking from the planet and don't give anything back.
Yeah. But the transition from Kali Yuga to Sat Yuga is instantaneous, because there can be a decline from perfection, and that perfection can become weaker and weaker until we get to the opposite polarity of Kali Yuga, which is where it becomes a parasitic system. But what's actually happening is that the realization of all the humans waking up to their true nature is the waking up of the infinite being to itself. Mm-hmm. So there can be an instantaneous transformation, and that's really what's on the cards at the moment, that there can be a total end, because it is only a dreamscape, really. It's just, it isn't ultimately real. And so there can be that transformation. And so self-realized people become anchor points, really. And it's because we can hold infinite love, infinite bliss, infinite possibilities within the realm of limitation. And the more that becomes a possibility for everyone, then the more it becomes anchored in the human psyche and the more it becomes accessible. Mm. And the thing with self-realization is that it's totally harmless and it's totally benign, because when you see that everything is arising within the field of consciousness that we all are, then you see everything as you. I mean, I had an email from a really nice guy who he's British. This was last week, and he actually works in Japan. He works for it's a robotics company, and he does software for them. And he's someone who spontaneously realized his true nature a few weeks ago, and he sent me an email just to say thank you, because he'd been watching the interviews on Conscious TV. But he was saying that in the email I received this week, and we're going to have a chat in a few days' time, he said that he's working with people where they're really excited about advancing this technology, the robotics technology, but since realization, he really just loves looking at the flowers in the garden. So
beautiful, yeah.
So really, I think that's a kind of indicator of the way things can go, because with self-realization, and self-realization is really accessible now. If somebody wants it, it's there. Mm. And so, because that opportunity is there, there's the possibility of this becoming exponential. And I think with Rhonda's book, that's made a massive difference. Rhonda's almost like a mother, and she's, she has a massive heart, and she's quite emotional, and she just has this feeling of love towards the whole human race. And so you can see that there are shifts taking place on that level.
And she found you through Conscious TV as well.
Exactly. Well,
yeah.
Conscious TV is probably, the biggest facilitator of realization on the planet.
Are you?
And when you
I think so.
Well, absolutely. Because your intention with Ian when you set it up, Ian liked the idea of having a TV station, didn't he?
Yes.
And I think because you kind of enhance each other's experience, then it moved on to a different level. But because you and Ian function from Effortless Being, it's moved into a realm that you could have never imagined. And I know from the people, I know that there are certainly over 2,000 people who've realised their true nature as a result of talking to me or talking to people who that I've spoken with, because I've spoken to quite a few therapists and people who have become teachers themselves now.
Yeah, yeah.
But other people like Rupert Spira, and Muji.
Yeah, he was like you, one of our first interviews.
Yeah.
And now he has like 1,000 people in the seminar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Roger Linden and, lots of them. I mean, all the people in Rhonda's book, they're amazing. I really love all of them.
Yeah.
And so goodness knows how many they're helping. But it's, it is on a really major scale now. And so it is a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah.
So
you
can't really comprehend the scope of it in a way now.
Well, I know you just open these days the computer and there are loads and loads of people who are doing something
Yes.
similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like everybody interviews everybody else.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is an amazing time, really.
Yeah. So David, is there anything else you would like to say before we do the exercise and everybody can realize their true nature?
Well, let's do that and let's see what comes from that.
Okay,
Renate.
good. So,
Okay.
our cameraman is not supposed to close his eyes, but he knows his true nature already. Yeah.
Yes. Good.
So, do you want to look into this camera to make the exercise? So you talk to the audience, or you want to look?
I'd like to talk to you,
Okay.
because you can be the you can be
The student.
The student.
Yes.
You've got to pretend to be, though, because you.
Sure. Do I have my eyes open or closed?
Yeah, have them open.
Yeah.
So it's really just noticing any thoughts arising effortlessly. So in this moment, are there any thoughts arising effortlessly?
I just realized I don't have any thoughts.
That's the problem. I've tried this a couple of times with people who are self-realized, and there aren't any thoughts.
But I could think about, I can make myself think. After this interview, we are going to sit, just thinking now, around the table and have lunch together.
Lovely. Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so that a thought arose effortlessly.
Yeah.
And so on the level of the body, are there any sensations or feelings arising?
Mm-hmm. So I feel the chair is pressing into my back.
Okay.
And I feel my hands a bit cool.
Okay, good.
Which they normally are.
Good.
Yeah.
So one could say there's effortless awareness of the weight of the body against the chair and effortless awareness of the coolness of the hands. Mm. So there isn't anything that needs to be done to make those sensations arise. No. Okay. So in the room, are there any sounds arising? Maybe the sound of these two voices.
The sounds of these two voices, and I hear the sound of the lamp, and the cameras, and other than
that's
that,
good.
it's very quiet.
So all those sounds, those sounds are effortlessly arising. The awareness of the light coming through the window, mm-hmm. And so they're all effortlessly known. And so what we can do is we can take an example. So let's take the example of the awareness of the light here in front of us. And could you just engage the mind to comment on that light in some way? Because there's the direct, effortless knowing of that light, and that's just arising in our vision.
Yes, and now I can engage.
But you can engage the mind to comment.
Yeah, I can comment that this is a square light, and it's kind of a milky glass, so it's not too bright, shining on us, and it has 4 little screws.
Yes.
I can see, and I'm just wondering why it's on the floor, but there are also two above us.
That's brilliant.
So so I start focusing on something.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So self-realization is utterly simple, because we've been conditioned to believe that everything we experience comes in through the mind, when really it's being registered directly in awareness or in beingness. So there's the direct knowing of the light, which is just, we know fully what that light is. But then there's the conceptualizing process, which we can engage, where we engage the mind consciously to comment on the nature of that. But those two things are distinct, because our true infinite nature is effortless being. So everything is arising effortlessly. So the thoughts arise effortlessly, the sensations arise effortlessly, the perceptions arise effortlessly. But then we also have this secondary device, which is the mind, and we can engage the mind consciously. And the mind always gives rise to concepts of limitation. So even though there are an infinite number of things we could say about the light, we focus on certain things, like we can say it's square, that it's smoky, that it has 4 screws, and so the mind always is an instrument of limitation. Mm-hmm. But the conditioning we have as humans from a very early age, and the education system and the way the media functions, is all to do with making us function from the mind rather than from effortless being. Because effortless being is what we truly effortlessly are. There's no effort required to be, because we're just being. Mm. But then the mind is engaged, and when the mind's engaged, it requires effort, because we have to sort of wind it up to come up with a few thoughts.
So when you do your pointing, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, not at all. No, not at all.
So when you do your pointing, you somehow, it does not coming out of your mind.
Yeah, it's showing that it's really allowing people to see that they are already effortless being, that there is no shift. It's just that the mind can be giving rise to thoughts of limitation. For instance, I'm not self-realized, or what do I have to do to get there? I need to be meditating, I need to go to India, I need to go and see my guru, or whatever it is. But actually everyone is already the effortless, timeless being. It's just that there's the mind which is spinning other ideas, which is saying, I need to do this, I've got to go over there. And the mind is in the realm of effort, whereas our true nature is effortless being. Mm. And that's why I was explaining earlier the way becoming familiar with the koshas is very useful, because you can see that by resting as effortless being, that we're in Vijnanamaya kosha, or the body of wisdom, which is where infinite intelligence is available to us and where intuition is available. And that arises effortlessly, whereas the mind can be utilized as well. And when we engage the mind, it can give rise to certain thoughts and concepts. But the mind will never give rise to realization, because the mind is the obstacle to realization in a way. Although there really is no obstacle, because nothing can get in the way of our effortless being, of our effortless nature. Mm. So, but also there are one or two things which can be quite useful pointers, and that is that the way the sense of individuality is maintained is mainly through language. So, for instance, when I speak to people, quite often I would say to them, what's arising in awareness? Are there thoughts arising at the moment? And in the early days, people tend to answer by saying, well, I'm aware of some thoughts arising to do with what I've got to do in a moment, or I'm aware of these thoughts arising in my body. But the thing that makes it much easier is to realize that awareness or beingness is impersonal. So a better way to answer would be, there is awareness of thoughts arising, or there is awareness of emotions arising, because the awareness is impersonal. And so it's better, for instance, people say, I am aware, or they ask the question, am I aware? But it's really the wrong question. It would be better to say, there is awareness, because awareness is impersonal. So by saying I am aware is actually taking the personal and adding it to the impersonal.
But isn't the I the one who knows itself?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But the I that knows itself is an impersonal ocean of beingness. It's only on the level of manifestation that the personal comes into being.
Mm-hmm. So the important thing is to be not stressed and to be relaxed in your true, fall back into your true nature.
Exactly.
Yeah. In the moment you step out and get stressed.
Yes.
Which a lot of people are these days.
Because all of the stress, all of the agitation, all of the difficulty only exists within the conceptual realm. It's only when we engage the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So realizing that, and then noticing the distinction, and realizing that we are already effortless being. That's all we can ever be. And as effortless being, we can always rest in that. So the liberation is to know that by resting as effortless being, the solutions we need will arise from infinite intelligence. And so we don't need to engage the mind, because the mind will do its best to come up with solutions, but it will always come up with limiting concepts, which are never really the solution.
Yeah. Well, how easy it all sounds listening to you. And
exactly.
it is easy.
It is.
Yeah. And I often wonder, oh my God, there's so many complicated teachings around, and we get lost in all these teachings. And they are, well, you're just a very great pointer, David.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's really only the way, because there is only the infinite being, and the infinite being is revealing itself to itself. Mm. So earlier teachers, it was to do with things like austerity or living in a monastery or whatever, wearing hair shirts or whatever it was. And then it becomes easier, and then you discover people. The first person I knew who was self-realized was a boy called Arthur, who was he was only 18, and he went to South America, and he realized his true nature. And so when you can talk to someone who's realized their true nature, it starts to become more accessible and easy. And then you see other teachers where there's a sense of ease, and gradually you realize the simplicity of it. But actually this is an intermediate stage. Even the very simple pointing that we just did is a kind of intermediate stage, because the ultimate stage, which hopefully will be very soon, is when everyone spontaneously realizes their true nature. They don't need pointing.
Yeah.
And that is beginning to happen. People are emailing me and contacting me, and that's already happening.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I think that's a nice place to stop.
Mm. Yeah.
Just the idea or the thought that we are all about to wake up.
And that's in the story, but it's
yes,
it's great.
It's a good story,
it's a good
story. Ending.
It is. It's a story we want to enjoy.
In the middle of the pandemic, it's a good story. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's the pandemic is almost. It's showing that we're at the opposite polarity, because when you know that Sat Yuga is infinite love, infinite bliss, infinite possibilities, infinite freedom, then anything which is pointing towards those qualities is leading us into freedom. Whereas anything that's to do with limitation, which is you can't leave your house, you can't do this and you can't do that, is taking us in the other direction. But the intensity of the restrictions that are currently apparent are actually the invitation back to our infinite nature, and it's a very profound invitation, because there's a kind of desperation, because you can see it's getting to a point where all you can do is surrender, because the limitations are so extreme.
Yeah.
Or surrendering happens.
Yeah, it all points back to yourself. Yeah. There's nothing you can do on the outside.
No.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you, David. Thank you for coming.
Well, it's been lovely to
us.
see you again and to have a conversation with you. So,
Yes.
yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Okay, well, Thank you for watching Conscious TV, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye. Yes, and maybe I mention also, I forgot to mention, you can reach David through he does not do seminars or groups, but you talk to people. Yeah.
Yes.
And your website is?
Is nonconceptualawareness.com.
Yeah, nonconceptualawareness.com. Bye-bye.
Rest your arms on your desk. Rest your head on your arms. Rest your eyelashes on your cheeks. Think of less and 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 let the darkness make you calm. It's shushy, shushy, shushy time. It's shushy, shushy, shushy time. It's a little night time in the day. It's a little night time in the day. Listen to your breath, to the beat of your heart, to the day outside this class. Birds, the weather, streets and cars, and far away the sky, the stars. It's shushy, shushy, shushy time. It's shushy, shushy, shushy time. It's a little night time in the day. It's a little